Hey everybody, welcome to the Dungeoncast. I'm Will.
I'm Brian.
This is the podcast where we talk about everything Dungeons and Dragons, from jumping jockelwares to juicy juxtaposition. And today, we're talking about the Drow. The Dungeoncast. All right, so today's the day, Brian.
Oh, the day for what?
The day that we're talking about Dark Elves.
Oh, we're here.
Finally.
The Drow.
The Drow.
Them Drows.
So much goddamn lore on that, like, I'm just going to apologize ahead of time. We're going to cover as much as we can, but this is probably just going to be considered a thorough, but a brief, but still fairly thorough overview of the species of the Drow.
We're going to hit all the main topics.
Yeah, there's a lot of lore because this has been... The Drow are probably one of the most iconic D&D monsters and probably the most influential one that Gygax came up with. They're not entirely original. They're based off the old... There's an Old Norse
Tale?
I guess story, yeah, the Prose Edda, and in the Prose Edda they talk about the Light Elves and the Dark Elves.
Okay.
And there's little to nothing written on them. But I think he just took this idea from...
There are these things. You're welcome.
Well,
Run with it.
It's a bit conflicting on what the Dark Elves even were. It might have just been another word for the dwarves in Nordic lore, but that's neither here nor there.
Because they live in caves.
That's where he took the idea.
In mountains.
The word drow is actually an alternative pronunciation of the Shetlandic dialect of the Scottish tongue, trow, which is in itself a derivative of the word troll.
Okay.
So the word drow doesn't mean anything.
All right.
It just
neat.
It's just, yeah, that's just how language works.
That's just how we do.
So what
in
is
the English realm.
what is a dark elf? Okay. First off, we're going to be talking about classic like Greyhawk and Forgotten Realms lore. At the end, I want to talk about like the things I do with drow, because what I do, I take very little from classic D&D drow lore, just because I've never been a fan of taking an entire race of anything and making it all evil.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this in the Goblin episode and in Half Orcs and a bunch of other episodes.
Yeah, we don't want to I know it's kind of like a touchy suspect kind of thing sometimes for some people with like the drow and stuff.
Right.
So we want to show look, this is a podcast that talks about the stuff that Wizards of the Coast writes and D&D out of the player's handbook and like the original lore, and then we're gonna hit you with some stuff like what we like to do and what we see other people that like to do with the Dark Elves, because it's not so like we like to treat them like a people where there's like a society and they're not just like inherently evil like bad creatures, but but the original lore is more like that.
Yeah, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I would say the main thing is that like while the stuff with gnolls and the stuff with goblins and stuff with orcs is extreme, my problem with the drow is that it's extremely extreme, and we'll get into it. And there are some things that are really cool about that concept, because it's fucking scary, the things that these people do to each other. It's like, and it's all under like this evil goddess that's influencing them. But again, my main problem is there are players who want to play drow, and like if you can't have this and that working at the same time. And I think this is where a lot of players have a problem with like dark elf characters. They're so married to the official lore that they can't just say, well, you know what, maybe drow work differently in my world. Which,
yeah, like
that's just poor DMing.
Take the freedom that like this, like a role-playing game gives you, and go with it. I mean, if you have a player at your table that wants a certain thing and it's going to make them happy and it doesn't fuck up your thing going on,
absolutely,
just do it.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So, but let's get into the official lore. So generally speaking, the drow are a subrace of elf that dwell in the Underdark. They are noted to have shock white hair and skin tones that range anywhere from like, I've seen as light as like a light blue.
Okay.
Deep purples are more common, and obsidian, like true black,
like the monsters in Lord of the Rings, kind of. Or do you mean more like?
I guess the Uruk-hai are like, they have obsidian colored skin. Yeah, much like that. Yeah.
Okay. I like purple a lot. Like that.
I think purple's the most popular and it's the most common you're gonna see.
That's like some of the Magic Brian from Adventure Zone stuff I've seen. It's
very
like
classic.
Purple.
Yeah, very classic. Generally, the entire civilization is considered to be strongly chaotic evil, and they are shunned and hated by all surface races, and that hate is in reverse as well, and we'll get into that.
Sure.
They are ruled by an evil goddess named Lolth, the Spider Queen, and she is simultaneously both a goddess and a demon lord. So much so that you cannot talk about the drow without also talking about Lolth.
Okay. So it's like very inherently tied together.
Yes.
Like she's
yeah.
responsible for a lot of this
She's responsible
nonsense?
for everything.
Everything.
And she makes sure it stays that way.
How are you a goddess and a demon lord?
Well, let me tell you the quick story of Lolth, because like Lolth will get her own episode.
Yeah. My main question is planar access.
Yeah,
You know
planar
what I mean?
access. Let's talk about that. So Lolth used to be part of the Sildarine, which are that's the pantheon of elves.
Okay.
Under a different name. Oh my gosh, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. I do know it starts with an A, but she was the wife of Corellon Lorethian, and he is like the king. He's the Zeus of elves,
Sure.
basically.
Okay. Is he like fucked up like Zeus?
Yeah, sometimes he is.
Oh, damn.
He's generally a good deity. He
This is
really
a crazy episode.
Yeah,
already.
Zeus is definitely more of an asshole. Corellon is definitely a good deity, but there's some things that I feel that he does that make him kind of a jerk. But also remember, gods and deity in D&D are not infallible beings.
Right.
Like, they make
Yeah.
mistakes. And I think Corellon's made more than a few. So
Everybody makes mistakes.
yeah, as his wife and queen of the Elven Pantheon, he actually gave her domain over the entire subrace of the Drow. 'Cause
Okay.
back then, like, they all lived on the surface and they're all part of a greater
He's
society.
like, fuck it, here you go.
Yeah. She ultimately, we're not going to get into the details, but she ultimately betrays her husband and attempts to have him killed and tries to take over all of Elvenkind.
That's fun.
She turns her people, the Drow, against the rest of Elvenkind. So they, like, simultaneously, while she's doing her thing to betray Corellon and the rest of the Pantheon, she has them turn on the other elves, and there's a huge war.
So it's like on all scales.
On all
of
fronts.
this- Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. In the end, she fails. We're not going to get into the details. But Corellon punishes her by transforming her into the form of a giant spider and banishing her to the abyss.
So is she like? So the Drider. I picture the Drider.
Just one of her three forms.
Okay,
well,
because I'm like, you're a centaur, but you got a spider
her
body.
true form, because of Corellon's power, is the giant spider.
Okay.
Everything else she does is just through her own power. She changes the way she looks.
So let's talk about that for a second. Like,
Yeah.
because there's okay, if you're a Drider, you're just a centaur actually, but you're not a horse. You're a spider.
You're a spider.
So
/ dark elf.
where are we drawing the line?
What do you mean?
Why not like a fish? Oh, I guess that's a mermaid. So a mermaid is a centaur.
Yeah.
But, not a
I
horse.
think, Brian, I think you'll find in mythology, most mythological creatures are a human and an animal put together.
So, but like the
Like a
torso,
satyr.
right?
A satyr-
Because there's no like the front of a horse, the back of a person, because that's dumb.
Yeah, no.
Can you imagine just two giant horse legs up front and like
Yeah.
a horse face, and then like it can't sit down or like,
Yeah, but I
run?
mean, look at a minotaur. That's like a cow man.
Oh man, but okay, that's a little different because it's like a humanoid.
True. Satyrs are like goat from the hips down.
That's
Yeah.
there you go. Okay,
Yeah.
that one kind of lines up.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, back to actual Drow
Satyrs
lore.
got the short end of the stick because they don't got those two extra legs like the centaur.
That's true.
And then like the
But they
Drider.
can pass for humans easier.
Oh yeah, they can wear some good pants. They'd be like, these aren't my good. These aren't my good pants.
I just have
these are
a
my chaps.
deformity. Okay, so he banishes her to the abyss. The way she gets her demon lord status is the layer of the abyss she goes to had a demon lord. Well, she kills him.
Oh, neat.
And that's so now she has both
This
powers
mine
and
now.
titles. Yeah.
Okay. So
That's
she
all-
doesn't keep the original title of being a god.
She still has a shard of divinity.
Oh,
She's
wow.
still a lesser deity, and she's a demon lord.
So no one was able to like take that from her.
I'm sure they could have, but instead of killing her, I think Corellon couldn't kill her. Like
We wanna
he had
imprison you
feelings
forever.
for her
Oh.
still, so he banished her. Now the whole thing with Corellon is he's like a scorned. He's like he can't trust women now, even though he gets married again later, and like he also takes this out on her people, which is pretty shitty because what happens to them is the worst.
Okay.
The Drow also get exiled to the Underdark.
Okay, yeah.
And basically now there's just a permanent hate relationship between the Drow and all the rest of
Yeah, because
Elvenkind.
they're like on permanent beholder watch down there.
Basically. So because of their history, the Drow have a deep hatred for all surface dwellers, but especially elves and especially high elves.
Okay.
They plan for their ultimate revenge when Lolth deems them ready. So Drow society is extremely complicated and brutal. This is partially because they live in the Underdark, which is a horrible place, and it's hugely because of Lolth's restrictions on like what they can and can't do.
Oh.
It's astonishing to me that they managed to function as a society at all, let alone be a dominant force of the Underdark, which they are to a certain extent. They were already assholes before the Underdark. The Underdark just makes it a billion times worse. And Lolth, I think what it is Lolth becoming a demon lord probably probably affected her already fucked up ways and made her even worse.
Like some kind of corruption.
Yeah, so I haven't really seen that written anywhere, but that tracks for me. So the Drow exist in city-states ruled by powerful noble houses that the noble houses weren't even necessarily like families like normal noble houses are. They're just groups of Drow that had the power and managed to seize and hold most of the land and resources available.
Okay.
Besides those noble houses, pretty much all other Drow are slaves. So 95% of the Drow population are slaves to Drow.
And we're talking about classic right now, or are we talking about Forgotten Realms or something?
This is, well, it's both. Well, in Gary Gygax's, you would probably like Gary Gygax's original Drow lore. They weren't much like this at all.
Okay.
They were evil, but they were just evil elves that lived underground, and that was
It's not
basically
so
the
in
gist
depth.
of it. Yeah.
Okay.
But Forgotten Realms and other settings really just delve into it, and I would say Forgotten Realms probably has the most fleshed out Drow lore because Drizzt Do'Urden is probably the most famous D&D character in history.
Okay.
And he's a dark elf who turned up on his kind, came to the surface. And I'm sorry, guys, I'm not talking about Drizzt in this episode. Like, this is the most Drizzt you're getting. Drizzt will get his own episode, but I'm just not doing it. I'm just not.
There's too much. I see your notes.
Yeah.
There's just too much here.
Yeah, and Drizzt, he would fill up 4 pages of my notes on his own. And
Damn.
honestly, to understand Drizzt, you got to understand the Drow in their entirety first. So
here you
that's
go.
what we're
we
doing.
did our
first.
Underdark episode. We're doing our Drow episode.
Yeah. So
We'll probably do a Lolth episode eventually.
Okay, here's an important note because this is going to feed into everything else. In Drow, the species of Drow, the men are actually smaller and weaker physically.
I remember something like that.
That's a thing to remember. So let's get into it. So the Drow society is simultaneously a strict matriarchy, theocracy, and like militaristic like society.
Okay.
Each house is ruled by a matron mother. The matron mothers are almost always simultaneously high priestesses of Lolth. According to Lolth's doctrine, women are of far greater value. As a matter of fact, men are deemed just shy of worthless in this society, and they're treated thusly.
Okay.
It's probably worse for the slaves than it is for the noble males because noble males have different outs. But there are a lot of sacrifices that get done to Lolth, and it's almost always just a man slave.
Okay.
Just constantly being killed.
Okay.
Furthermore, when it comes to the clergy of Lolth, only women are allowed. Period. End of story. And the highest authority among the Drow are the priestesses. So
This feels like a Black Widow, like the way the Black Widow operates.
yes. And,
Okay.
well, I mean, and they're a spider worshipping people.
That's
so there,
cool.
There it is. Yeah. Again, very flavorful. This is very cool, but it gets crazy.
I mean, there's some a lot of unfortunate stuff here, but yeah.
I mean, but that's the thing. It just depends on like how you want to depict them. If you want a people that are just all evil, well, here it is. But I just don't like doing that.
Yeah.
I just don't like. I
like
think
the
it's
spider
too,
worshipping and how that kind of is playing into some things here.
I think it's too all encompassing because they literally give almost 0 outs for there to be good Drow, and that's shitty. All right, but let's keep going. So back to the chances for men. Men, no matter their station, the only chances for them to get out of this of being either slaves or sacrifices are join the military, which the military is very extensive for them. They have a very powerful military.
Yeah, I have some questions about that later, but
Okay, yeah, we'll get into it. The military section is probably towards the end of the notes.
okay, good.
Also, males are the only males are allowed to practice the arcane arts. So that's also now, if you show proficiency in that, you can get into an arcane school.
Okay.
And
That's kind of interesting. 'Cause
Yeah.
magic's a very powerful thing.
magic is very powerful, but
It's like you're weak. You like go read a book.
basically there's that. For
my God.
some reason, it's not stated why, but males have a better affinity in Drow society for the arcane. For some reason, they don't.
Okay.
There's no reason given. It's just the way it is. Just like the women are stronger and buffer, the men have a more affinity for the arcane.
Okay.
So let's talk about actual Drow society. So in Drow society, they're constantly on all levels. All Drow are vying for power amongst themselves.
Okay.
Treachery,
Like these noble houses and stuff.
not just the noble houses, but we're mostly going to be talking about them, but even just amongst the commoners. Like
Okay.
treachery, murder, betrayal, scheming, they're all super encouraged by Lolth. She wants you to do those things to rise to the top.
Do bad deeds.
Indeed. Basically, her creed is about like only the most brutal and strong and cunning will rise to the top in a society that runs like this.
Okay.
And she's mostly right, but this also has some really bad effects. Like it prevents them from ever being a force strong enough to actually invade.
Yeah, because you're like conniving and murdering.
Yeah,
all the time.
you're constantly culling your own. You're constantly weakening yourself. And alliances are constantly being formed and broken. Just like within the same breath. There's no real trust. Compassion doesn't exist in this society because Lolth doesn't want it to. She wants this to be a society where no one can trust each other. And because of that, like children that show signs of like compassion or kindness to others, that is punished physically. Like literally love and kindness is beaten out of you as a child in this society. It's fucked up.
He said he loves me. We have to whoop him.
Like what is this love?
We'll be dropping rocks on your feet until the end of time, until you say you're sorry.
As a matter of fact, the only reason these noble families persist as pervasively as they do is because the family unit is such a useful tool for the noble houses that they hold on to it.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's no real love here or there. As a matter of fact, the parents don't even raise their own children in the noble houses. They hire slave drow to do that for them.
For sure.
Yeah. It's really fucked up. The commoners or slaves, meanwhile, and there's more than just drow slaves. There's even lower than them are the not drow slaves. Anything not drow is also a slave, and that's like bottom of the barrel.
Okay. So, like what gnomes live in the Underdark?
Sure. Yeah, they'll enslave them. They'll enslave anything.
Which gnome is that? Is it
the deep gnomes?
The deep gnomes.
They'll enslave deep gnomes,
deeper than all the other gnomes.
Quagoths, any surface dweller, dwarves. Like,
aren't those
you're thinking mind flayers.
Yeah, aren't
no,
they
they won't
Underdark?
enslave mind flayers.
Well, because it would be kind of hard to do that, right?
Yeah, it's just they're too much of a liability. Just kill them. Yeah, and they're constantly warring with the illithids and stuff like that.
Oh, shoot.
But the commoners and slaves, meanwhile, they live under constant oppression and poverty. Even if you're like a shop owner or like a craftsman, like you are at the whim of the priestesses. Like if they don't like you, they can come in to your shop every day and just take shit and tax you, and they'll tax you and take stuff and do whatever it takes to run you out of business.
Bummer. So there's like a downtown sector, but there's constantly new businesses and stuff.
Right. The priestesses they're essentially untouchable, saved by other priestesses, and the priestesses are constantly backstabbing and betraying each other, trying to raise us up. It's a nasty, nasty life down here. So because of all the treachery and all the murder and all the backstabbiness, it actually ends up cutting the average lifespan of drow extremely short.
Well, yeah.
Like elves, including drow, they have a longevity of like
1,000 a year?
Yeah, anywhere from like 750 to 1,200 years, depending on which setting you're using. And because of this, they're dying at like high rate, but they make up for it by breeding at about the same rate as humans, which is highly...
that's unlike elves.
It's unlike elves, but it's because, well, there's a couple reasons for this. Number one is because they need to replenish their numbers, but they're also a hedonistic society because Lolth wants them to revel. And she's a corrupting demonic force. She's going to be corrupting and demonic.
Do the bad sex.
Do the bad. yeah, that. So let's get into the reproduction of drow.
Okay.
Let's get into the courtship. So in drow society, courtship is the domain of women. It is not something men do. A man who tries to initiate a relationship is put to death.
Oh,
regardless of reciprocation.
Cool.
The female decides who their courtship is going to be with and when it begins. The man has no say. If two noble female drow have interest in the same individual.
We talked about this before.
We talked about this. Actually, I said something that wasn't quite correct. It's actually worse. So, number one, the man has no say. And he's now stuck in a rivalry that is 99% likely to just end in his death. There's nothing he can do. The women will do whatever it is that they do to backstab each other on the situation or spite each other. Okay. And they'll use the man as a tool to do it. But when one rival either concedes or loses interest in the rivalry, what they'll do is they'll flay the skin of the man except for the head, and they'll drop the body off at the house of the other woman. Oh. Say like, all right, you win, basically.
Oh man,
that's to say the other person won.
Right,
that's insane.
I give up. Here's your boyfriend. I skinned him.
So yeah, another thing too about Drow is, on average, they are physically exemplar. They are like apex level, and it's because like one of the main factors in courtship amongst the Drow is
push-ups.
No,
the amount of push-ups.
No, well, it's
burpees. Burpees are harder.
Selective breeding is a thing with the Drow. So like they're
Breed to be
practitioners.
strong.
They're practitioners of eugenics.
Okay.
Like only the apex members get to breed with the nobles and so on and so forth.
Oh man.
Yeah. So it's
This
thoroughly
is suspect all over the place.
thoroughly fucked up.
Yeah.
And because of that, though, Drow are notably almost across the board exceptionally beautiful. And we'll get into the whole assassin schools that exist in these Drow schools, but I guarantee you that seduction for both sexes is probably something that's thoroughly used to their benefit.
Okay.
They also they do this on a level like they maintain beauty standards of the surface level for use like this.
Okay.
And let's take a short rest.
Let's do it. Hey everybody, welcome to the part of the show where we're taking a short rest and we're not talking about the last thing. I've never been so excited for the short rest. Rest. This is an opportunity to say thank you to the listener, and we should do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, listener.
Absolutely.
If you can hear the sound of our voice, we really appreciate you being here on the show. It's been a wild ride.
Indeed.
It's all thanks to you guys. Our contest is over. We're probably gonna have another contest pretty soon at some point. I don't know. Keep an eye out for that. If you have, I don't know if this is cool with Will, but if you have any ideas of what you would want us to give away or what
I
you're
already know
in,
what we're giving away next. We're gonna be giving away the new
Mordekainen's?
the new book. Yeah, the Mordekainen's.
That's how you say it. Mordekainen's planar.
I think
Good
it's
times.
the Tome of Foes or
The
something
Tome
like
of
that.
Foes. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And
that'll be coming out in May, I think. And yeah, I'll announce that when we start doing that.
It's supposed
when we
to
get a
be
little closer.
a bigger book, right? Like
I heard it's gonna be pretty thick.
pages.
Yeah, it's gonna have a lot of planar lore and planar options. So I'm excited for it.
Don't write tome on it and then give me a Xanathar's Guide size.
Yeah, that one is pretty
book.
thin, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, well, cool. So keep an eye out for our Mordekainen's contest. It's going to be the same deal where you tweet out a link to the show, #Dungeoncast, and probably also leave a review on iTunes. We've been seeing a lot of great reviews on iTunes, and we really appreciate it, you guys. It's very nice to go in and read those. There's a lot of them now. I don't know what we need to, how many we need to get recognized by iTunes in some way, shape, or form. But
just the more there are, the easier it is for people to find us.
Yeah,
and that's just the thing that's going to be forever.
Right. But thank you guys. Really.
Yeah. No, it seriously helps. So thank you guys.
Contest or not, that goes a long way. Hitting subscribe on YouTube and hitting the like button on YouTube, it goes a long way. Even on SoundCloud, hitting the like button and stuff. Yeah. Just thanks a lot. Speaking of all those things, you can find us on soundcloud.com/thedungeoncast. You can find us on YouTube. Just search The Dungeoncast. You can email us at thedungeoncast@gmail.com. If you're interested in our Patreon, it's patreon.com/thedungeoncast. Go check us out. There's bonus content, early episodes, one-shot adventures, two-shot adventures, and show notes. And there's probably going to be some original soundtrack music going up on there pretty soon, probably in the $5 tier. And if anybody came in that's new, we're going to catch you on the next episode. So thank you guys very much for participating in that. And I think that's all we got. And when we're done with everything we've got, we go back to the show.
Indeed. Let's go back to the show.
We're back.
And we're back.
We're back.
And we're going to talk about more Drow stuff.
More Drow.
So,
yay.
So we've covered a lot of some of the more fucked up aspects of their day-to-day life.
We certainly have
in the Underdark. But let's talk more about just more Drow stuff. So another thing about the Drow, and I think we've noted this with most of the evil monsters in D&D, is the arrogance and the egocentrism kind of deal, where they think that they're the superior. It's the same with the Drow. They, to an extreme degree, they consider themselves superior to all races, and they want to crush and enslave everybody else.
Sure.
And it's just, that's their
thing. What it is.
Yeah, that's Lolth. Lolth's thing is, I guess when she came to the Abyss, I think that the demon lord there was also like a spider deity.
Okay.
Or being. I just know that there's a plethora of spiders there. I mean, they're called the demon web pits.
And she got bit, and then she became a superhero.
She observed that amongst the demonic spiders in her realm, like they would constantly fight each other, and by fighting each other, they would become bigger and stronger until there was only one big strong one left, and like that's the inspiration she has for what she wants her people to do. She wants that scenario all the time.
Okay.
So anyways, the Drow, as I said before, are known for the military and martial might. The priestesses are the formal military leaders, but in actuality, it's the male military commanders that are actually out there fighting and leading the forces.
Okay, that are
in actuality
that are on the battlefield.
Yeah, while the priestesses are doing their political.
Yeah, they're standing in front of that like dimly lit room with a big map in the middle. Yeah, and they're like have those like pull cues or whatever that are like moving little pieces across.
Yeah, definitely. They're
like knocking stuff over, like all like.
Yeah, which isn't to say the priestesses aren't like an actual force to be reckoned with. They're extremely powerful.
Right.
Like these high priestesses are really high level clerics.
But they can't practice magic, but they get cleric magic?
They get cleric magic, yeah.
Okay.
Divine magic is in the realm of the women, and arcane magic is in the realm of the men. Kind of
different.
Deal.
Okay.
So not only are there, so the reason that the Drow militaries are so impressive is, number one, they have huge armies because they have the pick of the litter from their 90% population of slaves that want anything but to be slaves. And so they got that, but they also have really impressive and notable fighting styles. Like there's like all kinds of like sword and crossbow techniques that like are so effective that they're famous outside of the Underdark.
Oh,
like,
wow.
The Drow are known for these fighting styles, and there's a whole list of like the different fighting styles in the schools.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. But more than just their warriors being impressive, their troops are often bolstered with entire contingents of enslaved monsters.
Oh, shit.
Like minotaurs and bugbears and ogres fighting for the Drow.
Oh, man.
This is another thing that makes them so goddamn impressive.
This is fucking the 300 bad guy.
Yeah. Yes, that's actually a good one. Yeah, that is. It's what's his name? Emperor I can't remember his name.
Shit, I don't know.
Z. But
Xerxes.
Xerxes, yeah. So yeah, very much so. It's a nice analogy. Economically, Drow do have farmers and craftsmen like any other society, with the caveat that they're all peons, so they're all owned by the state.
Yeah. The state. That's a nice way to refer to it.
The biggest trade is slaves, non-Drow slaves. They're constantly they'll raid the surface, capture a bunch of people, have slaves. They'll trade slaves with other cities. They trade with the Shadowkai in the Shadowfell, and slavery is one of the biggest things. Another thing that the Drow trade with the Shadowkai is when they raid the surface, they get resources that you can't get in the Shadowfell. Different foods and herbs and just like materials, because the Shadowfell is a fucked up place.
Yes.
So remember I said in the Underdark episode that there are a lot of shadow crossings here in the Underdark, because the similarity between places in the Underdark and in the Shadowdark are going to be enough that you can cross. So there's a lot of trade between the Drow and the Shadowkai.
Okay, cool.
At least the Shadowkai that live in the Shadowdark.
Right.
You'll see that there's a book I read, a Forgotten Realms book called I think it's called Breaking the Chains. It features primarily Shadowkai characters. It's a really cool book, but you'll see that activity going on between the Drow cities and the Shadowkai cities. They deal in poisons. Some of the most powerful poisons are brewed and crafted by the Drow.
So poison's like a big thing in D&D, huh?
It is, especially amongst assassins.
Whoops, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I've noticed like there's a lot of anti-poison stuff going on. Like dwarves are good against, they're fortified, conned out against poisons. And like there's poison removal spells. And so
there's monsters that cause a lot of poison with their bite.
Okay.
And,
I haven't come across those yet.
It's mostly like spiders and snakes and stuff like that.
Makes sense.
Venomous creatures.
What you would think of in the normal world.
Right. And then, and the Drow, they brew potent poisons that assassins tend to use, which is another thing. There are very infamous assassin schools,
right?
Just on top of like
rogue guilds and stuff.
Yeah, on top of the warrior like fighting style schools. Excuse me. In the arcane schools, there's also the assassin schools, which are infamous as hell, and they're producing some of the most effective killers in the realm. So there it is. So these are the things that, despite all the things that the Drow do to undercut their own power, these are the things that keep them as a dominant force.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about other Drow deities. There are other Drow deities, but most of them pale in power to Lolth. Most are also evil as well.
Does Lolth like not get along with them?
So,
or are they cool?
Lolth, okay. Well, we're going to talk about this more in the Lolth episode, but when Lolth betrays Corellon, she does sway some deities to her side. There was a deity, I think his name was Gonadar, who he was in love with her, and she used him. And then when they were all banished, he thought he had a chance, and she ends up like no, you're ugly. Like basically is what she does, because he's like also an ooze lord. I don't know, it's weird. So lord. He's part of the pantheon, but he doesn't really.
He's bitter about it.
He doesn't really play nice with Lolth or any of that. Lolth and Corellon had children, both of which went with Lolth to the Underdark. One of which went not because she had to, but because she refused to abandon the Drow to her mother. She's the only good deity of the Drow pantheon. Her name is Alistrae. That's her name, Alistrae. She's the daughter of Lolth and Corellon. She's like the goddess of dance, song, sword fighting. She's chaotic good. I know she has a couple other domains, but those are the main things that are popular. Okay. She's like she's called the Silver Lady. She has silver hair.
That's cool.
And she works to protect Drow that are good and that wish to live in peace and not be part of this fucked up system.
Like on the low key, or is like she?
Yeah, it's mostly on the low key because like she's not held in good regard amongst the Drow people.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm not going to talk about Drizzt. Drizzt is an example of like a good Drow in the official lore. He's an extremely popular Forgotten Realms character who will get his own episode. I think Drizzt has also caused a lot of backlash because he's so popular that you get a lot of players that want to play Drizzt-like characters.
Okay.
I think Drizzt is also one of the main reasons that playing a Drow PC has become popular. And, okay. So I think having good Drow is not that difficult at all.
No.
Like, not even close to difficult. But I think, again, people who are really married to this lore find that the only way to be a good Drow is to basically be a Drizzt clone. Because with Drizzt's story, he was a slave. He wasn't even a slave. He was like the son of, I think, a prominent warrior and craftsman. He's part of the Do'Urden family. Either way, he was kind of like in that middle ground between being a slave and not quite a noble. And bad stuff happens to him. He ends up like he just wants out of the whole situation. And he gets out and he goes on a epic journey and he goes to the surface and he's like a good dude and yada, yada, yada. But like being like a dark, brooding guy who comes from a messed up background isn't the only way to be a good Drow, because you don't have to be married to any of this lore.
No.
So I wrote down some ways that you could rework the lore quite easily to fit your homebrew campaign and make not evil Drow just as prominent as evil Drow. So like maybe Lolth never existed, no betrayal ever happened. Done. You're just done.
There you go.
Yeah, maybe dark elves are simply the dwarves of elves. They're just underground elves. They're elves who happen to live underground. There's nothing evil about them. That's just where they live.
That's where they be.
Maybe a huge section of the population broke off from Lolth en masse and they returned to the surface world. And here's the thing. Okay, let's get back to Corellon real quick, because I feel like Corellon fucked over the Drow people, because sure, they as a whole did betray you, but like they did it under the sway of a deity.
Yeah,
and
so
like
you could,
by betraying them and by sending them to the Underdark, you basically put them in the worst position possible and left them to the mercy of Lolth herself. Like. So, like, what chance do they fucking have if you follow that lore?
Yeah, you could have stopped that, and now you don't have this huge sect of your people that's like evil.
Exactly. In my world, the way I run it is I killed Lolth. Lolth was slain at some point in the history, and it broke the Drow population in two. Basically, there's a section of the Drow people that remain dedicated to Lolth's teachings, and they are basically identical to the classic lore. Okay. And then the other 50% said, fuck this. Like, we don't have to be like this. And Lolth is gone. Thank God. And they left and they came to the surface realm, and then up here, they've been flourishing ever since.
Okay.
So that's like I have your cake and eat it too. Basically, I have it so that if I want to use evil Drow, I have them. And if any player wants to be a good Drow, no problem. There's plenty of those.
I like having both. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Maybe this Lolth society does exist and it's really like turned and nasty, but we could also have like how is this the only drow?
Yeah, if you follow the lore from like when the Dark Elves were concepted all the way till now, like it tracks why there haven't been very many good Dark Elves, because if you follow that lore, they never had a fucking chance.
Yeah, they're basically prisoners
like,
from start to finish.
This is your game. This is unless you're running in Forgotten Realms or some other established campaign setting, this is your game. It could be whatever you want. And like, if your players want to play Drow, let them play Drow.
Yeah, I mean, we almost had a Drow player in the game that we were playing. So.
I'm sick of all the gatekeeping. I'm sick of the scoffing at players that want to be Drow. It doesn't help anybody. And if you're worried about Drizzt clones, like, you're not really worried about the Drow as a playable race. You're worried about certain particular players. And like those particular players are going to play annoying PC ideas regardless of whether you allow Drow or not. It's stupid.
I think like this is a fantasy setting. You don't have to do like these like...
You don't do anything.
Yeah,
do whatever you want.
Exactly. Do it. Be open, be free, rework the lore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those are all great ways to tackle this, because like I don't want this in my setting. This is foul. I don't want it. I don't want it in my set. That's just me, though. I mean, I see the players that are really married to this idea that are like, no, you cannot have a good Drow.
That's stupid.
This is why. Like,
I mean,
I can do whatever I want.
You can do whatever you want.
That's
This is
my
my point.
fantasy game, and it's all made up.
Yeah, that's my point. If you want to just use the classic lore and stick to it strictly, that's fine. But don't hate on other people for doing differently. That's stupid. Anyways, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about Drow. I don't know if you have any more questions. We will probably talk plenty more about them when we talk about Lolth, and when Drizzt does eventually get his own episode.
Yeah, there's a lot of Drow stuff left.
Yeah.
Anything that we left out of this episode, I think, is going to get covered.
Pretty much. Yeah. I think the Drow will be thoroughly covered once we do the Lolth episode.
Yeah, between this episode, the Underdark episode, and those episodes.
Yeah.
That's pretty much going to get
covered.
it all.
Yeah.
That's a lot of... There's so much Drow stuff, though.
Yeah, there's an insane... it's because they're so fleshed out, and I attribute that mostly to Drizzt being so popular. So
right, okay.
It had to get fleshed out.
All right. I like the demigod feel that Drizzt has, though. I don't know a lot about Drizzt, but I feel like there's some like...
Well, he hasn't always been on that level of power.
Yeah, okay.
He's like a superhero now.
Okay.
So, yeah. All right, with that, let's call it a game.
Let's call it a game. Bye.
The Dungeoncast. She's one of my least favorite deities. They're just much cool. Like there's evil deities that are cool and scary. She is scary, but she's just a loser. She sucks.
For being a god, you sure are fucking losing.
You do suck.